questions, and then I'll share my 2 cents. And then at the end, if we have time, we'll do a little open Q&A as well. So
Awesome. Um, all right. So let's start with just kind of your background and your journey as a micro baker.
yeah. So I started my microbakery in April of last year. So it's been just under a year and a half. And I started baking sourdough like everybody else in the world basically during 2020, during the pandemic. And I've always loved baking though. Ever since I was a little girl, I loved being in the kitchen. Um, and so sourdough was just kind of adding like another skill to my baking repertoire. Um, and then in 2023, January of 2023, my New Year's resolution was that I wanted to try to only bake my family's bread for the year, and not buy bread from the grocery store. And the more that I baked it, I had already been baking it casually, just probably not as frequently. And I was like wanting to bake more, but obviously my family can only eat so much bread. And so I was like, oh, maybe a few people in my neighborhood would be interested in buying bread from me on a regular basis. And so I posted on social media, and the rest is history. I didn't even realize that there was any demand for fresh bread in my community at all. Like I just was not expecting that. And people were so interested, and I received a lot of orders very quickly. Um, and it just very organically grew from there. Um, yeah, when I started this, my intention was very casual. And then like a week later, I'm like making a logo and like an Instagram account and like all this stuff. My background is in graphic design, so I love branding. So immediately my brain was like firing with all these ideas, and I just in general am a big dreamer. So once I realized, I was like, oh, maybe I've tapped into something good here. I kind of just went from there, and 3 loaves a week turned to five, five turned to 10, 10 turned to 20, and so on and so forth. Um, so April of 2023 was when I started my bakery. In July of 2023 is when I kind of made my big investment, and that was the point where I was like, okay, either I'm gonna like chill a little bit and be happy with just baking, 10 loaves a week, or I'm going to make an investment and let this thing keep growing. And so that's what happened in July. And um, then things just continued from there.
That's awesome. So what's the story behind Little Pearl Breads?
Yeah, yeah, the name. So it's a play on my daughter's names. I have two daughters. Their names are Margot and June. And Margot means pearl in French. June means young. So I kind of like changed young a little bit, but I did little pearl. So
That's sweet.
that's where it came from.
Oh.
Yes.
Cool. So what made, okay, I guess you kind of went over this. What made you want to start your bakery and how did you start it? Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so let's talk about what did you start making? Like what I mean, you said sourdough, but I mean,
Yeah, that's
like
actually a good
making-
question. So the first place I posted about my bread was in the Nextdoor app. I don't know if you all are familiar with it, but it's basically a community app. And my purpose in that was that I wanted to try to get customers like very close to me. I loved the idea of like being the neighborhood baker. So I posted in there, and I posted like a lot of things, and because I just didn't think that many people would be interested. So I had like cinnamon rolls, sandwich bread, classic loaves, cookies, like all of these things. And then everybody was ordering all of them. And I was like, oh no, like this is not good. And I just kept saying yes. And so once I kind of got a grip on everything that was happening, I reassessed and realized that it was way more profitable for me to offer more quantities of less things and find my niche and like hone in on a few things instead of just trying to make everybody happy by offering a bunch of different items. So soon after that, I kind of switched and I just did classic loaves, classic sourdough loaves, chocolate chip cookies, and like one specialty loaf, depending on what I wanted to offer for that week. And I still kind of do something similar even now. It's a little bit more expansive, but even to this day, I do classic loaves, sandwich loaves, scones, cookies, and sometimes sandwich loaves. So I still keep my menu pretty small.
Got it. So, so okay, let's take you back to April 2023.
Mm-hmm.
You like what was your customer base like at that point? Um, and how do you feel like you got the customers? Do you feel like it was from
Mm-hmm.
next door app or just
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that probably the most powerful marketing tool for me so far has been word of mouth. I think that if you have something special and you're offering a good product, people are going to want to talk about it. Um, I think that there are a lot of elements of that too that tie in with like my social media, and things of that nature. But a lot of it was word of mouth. So I kind of got that kickstart from posting on the Nextdoor app and like Facebook groups and stuff like that. And that just on its own really helped kind of naturally propel a little bit here and there. You know, somebody would order bread from me, tell their friend about them, and say, like, oh, yeah, and she posts these videos on Instagram. And it was just very like niche and unusual for like some random girl to be baking a bunch of bread in her house. That's just not that normal. So I think that intrigued people. They'd follow me on Instagram. And then, you know, that just kept trickling out. It was like the mixture of like, wow, this is really good bread. And wow, there's only 3 ingredients in it. And oh, wow, look at these videos that she's posting. That's kind of cool. And that just kind of went from there. And then in July, right before I got my oven, I did my first ever farmers market. And again, that was just a really great thing to keep propelling me forward. I didn't do farmers markets regularly because I knew that I didn't want them to be my main source of um, the main way that I sold bread. As a mom, it's not as practical. I really love when people just come to my house and get stuff straight from me instead of having to pack it all up and go. So I did farmers markets mainly as a marketing tool. Every single person that bought from me, I'd give them my card. I'd say like, "Hey, I'm not normally here, but I do have bread every week," and tell them how they can order, and stuff like that. And again, that was just really great for word of mouth and getting exposure out for my business and things of that nature. So that's kind of how it progressed.
Awesome. So what do you think were some of the best initial investments for you?
Mm-hmm.
Like what kind of got you going?
Yeah. So a little bit of like back end stuff. As soon as I realized that I was like even making this slightly more than a hobby, so like this was before I decided to buy my Simply and stuff. I did like open up a checking account, a separate checking account, which I highly recommend people do, so that you can actually track like, are you making money? You know, like how much are you spending? How much are you making each month? Just helpful to keep it separate. So I did that pretty early on. Um, and my husband and I agreed to invest a portion of money, um like $1,000 or something, and that was to buy like banetins, dough bins, a cooling rack, things like that. So, you know, an extra Dutch oven so that I could bake more than one loaf at a time. So, you know, we made some of those initial investments just to kind of let it grow a little bit. um and then, like I said earlier, in July, I was to the point where I was baking 20 loaves a week, which that was kind of the point where I was like, okay, in my home oven, I had a gas oven, so I could not open bake. You can only open bake in an electric oven. So I was really stuck at 2 loaves at a time. So I was baking for like 8 hours, right? Wait, math. Like more than 8 hours just to bake 20 loaves of bread. And I was like, okay, I either need to do less and be happy with that, or I have to take this to the next level. And so it's at that point I decided to invest in my bread oven, my 30-quart spiral mixer, and my refrigerator. We got a refrigerator, and really all three of those kind of go hand in hand. I often get asked, like, if you had to pick one, like, which one would you get first? And I'm like, they really do coincide a lot, because if you're going to be mixing a lot of dough, having a mixer is helpful. I always recommend people to consider that, because I actually developed wrist issues from hand mixing too much. And so quickly the mixer became a necessity. And then if you're mixing a lot of loaves in your mixer, then you need somewhere to let them proof overnight, cold proof. So you need a refrigerator. And then if you have all these loaves cold proofing in your refrigerator, you need something to bake them in. And so you need a bread oven. So it's kind of a chain reaction. And all of those things together, at that point, it was probably like a $11,000 investment. And that was 3 months after I started my business that we decided to do that. And so that's kind of the first big step that I took for my business.
Got it. Okay. So let's move into some of your baking techniques.
Hmm.
So what kind of flour do you use? That's
Yeah. So,
one of the questions.
I yeah, I get asked that a lot, because people are like, where do you get enough flour to do this? um, this is something that I'm probably going to be changing soon. I do use central milling flour, but I buy it at Costco. So you can buy central milling flour at Costco, and that works really well for me. Um, but yeah, I keep it pretty simple. It's a really good price, and it's my profit margin is still very high from buying it at Costco. So
Yeah, I feel like most of the people that we've had in to bake recipes with us or that we've talked about as well get it from Costco. So
hmm hmm. And I recently saw somebody on Instagram saying that they had like major issues with it, and were saying that like it was like completely breaking down. I have never had a single problem with it, and I've been using it for like a year and a half. It's been really reliable for me. So
that's awesome. So someone asked, I believe you have a method of preheat, steam, then full bake. What is that methodology and why is that needed?
yeah, so I think they're talking about like my routine with the Simply, right?
Sounds like it.
Okay, yeah. So the beauty of the Simply Bread oven is the automatic steam injection. And so this I'll just kind of run you through how I use the oven. I preheat the oven to 500 degrees just to get it really nice and hot. And then I do like pre-steam it just once before I even start baking. I do this because Mendel, who's like one of the engineers at Simply, he's really great. He was like, you don't have to do it, but it can just ensure that the water is all the way through the like tube that it uses to like actually inject the steam into the oven, so that when you do steam for the first time, once you actually have bread loaded, it fully is steaming inside of there. So I do my little pre-steam, and then score my loaves, put them in the oven. I turn the heat elements off. Well, first, okay, I'm sorry. I'm backtrack. Okay, I do my pre-steam. I score my loaves. I stick them in the oven. I steam them for 5 seconds. I turn the heat off, and I let it bake with the heat elements off for 8 minutes. Then I turn the heat elements back on and set the oven to 470. And I steam it again, and I let them bake for 12 minutes. And then I release the steam and let it bake for another 15 minutes. And that's how I do it. And then I take my loaves out. By the time I've scored my next load of bread, the oven is hot enough again. So there's not too much downtime in between.
Well, so okay, you were before you got the oven, you were making 20 loaves, and then now, like after you got the oven and got like acquainted with and everything like that, how like what are you at this point?
Yeah. So once I got my bread oven, it just like the sky was the limit for me. Like it felt like the capacity that I had was so just open. And yeah, my business grew significantly after I got my bread oven pretty quickly. Tomorrow I'm going to be prepping 90 loaves. So, um, That's actually the most I've ever done, 90 loaves. So it grew very quickly.
That's crazy.
Yes.
Okay, so do you have any tips for handling the dough in the summertime?
Yeah, I mean, okay, there are different ways that different bakers will handle summertime baking. Some people will decrease the amount of starter that they put in each loaf, so that it proofs a little bit slower. Some people will lower the hydration because it'll be a little bit easier to work with. Um, I don't change my recipe in the summer. I just shape faster. So I do use dough temperature to determine my bulk fermentation. So in the summertime, I just make sure to use really cold water. And when I mix in my commercial mixer, the mixer does heat the dough up a decent amount just from the motor running. And so I try to use very cold water. And then I keep an eye on my dough temperature throughout the whole time. And that works really, really well for me. I have not had any issues with that. I think that learning how to bake through the seasons is a skill that's honed with time, and something that I've definitely learned over the past year. But you get to a point once you really learn the craft and hone the craft on what the dough is going to feel like, what to expect. And it becomes a lot less daunting. Like I even remember last summer transitioning from summertime into fall, like really struggling with my dough. But I learned a lot through that. And now I feel very confident going from season to season. And I can adjust with the dough now instead of the dough adjusting and me just like trying to catch up to it. You kind of learn those things with time. So be patient with it, and learning how to use dough temperature is incredibly important if you're wanting to bake in bulk. I really don't think that you can successfully bake in bulk um, in a very reliable manner unless you learn how to use dough temperature. I do teach that in my ebook. And specifically in my ebook, I talk a lot about dough temperature when you're also working in an unpredictable environment, right? Like I'm not working inside of a proofing box, I'm working inside of my house. So the temperature of my home might be different than the dough temperature. And I kind of talk through that. But you can also find lots of free resources online about dough temperature as well. So it's not like some secret that I've figured out. It's on the internet too.
That's awesome. So this was not in the questions, but I think maybe it could be helpful. Was it difficult for you to get up to speed with cottage laws in your state?
So this is going to vary state by state. There are some, so like for example, I have a friend who's a micro baker in Oklahoma, and there is no cottage food license that she needs. They have a Food Freedom Act that makes it legal for her to bake in her home and sell without any sort of license. In Illinois, I would say it's pretty like middle of the road. We do have some restrictions. I do need a cottage food license, but it was not difficult for me to like get it. All I had to do was take a food handling course, pass that, and then apply with my county's health department. And it was free for me to apply. The class cost money, um, but it was actually very easy for me to get my cottage food license. But again, that's going to vary by state. Like it really is all over the place depending on where you live. So just make sure that you check with your local health department. That's where you would get the information that you need.
Yeah. So about how long of a process was that for you, the class, and then
Taking the class probably took me a couple of weeks because it was actually like a little bit surprisingly intense. Like I had to take this course, which by the way, zero of the information was helpful to me. It was like, what temperature should chicken be cooked to, and how long can it sit on the counter at this temperature before it needs to be refrigerated? It was like actually very useless to me. But I had to like study for the test, and then the test is proctored, so like they had to like see my arms and see that I hadn't like written on my arms to cheat or anything. But I passed on my first time. It was fine. And then once I did that and applied with my county, it was just like a couple of days.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
Um, cool. So, okay, let's move into managing a home bakery.
sure.
So how do you make time for it all? You have kids, you bake in your home, you have your family. Um,
Yeah,
do you ever have mom guilt?
sure. Those are all really good questions. So the answer to that question would vary depending on when you asked me throughout my microbakery journey. I actually think in a lot of ways it was harder at first, even though I was baking less, just because I was learning, I was trying to figure out a rhythm and a cadence that worked for us. Um, and everything took me longer, things like that, and so it was tricky in the beginning to find a rhythm that worked for us, but over time you figure that out. So for me, a lot of the work that I do is done before my girls are even up for the day, or during their nap in the afternoon, or after they go to bed at night. Um, and that has worked well for us. With that being said, the capacity at which I'm baking now, I could not do by myself. So like I don't want anybody to be fooled. I'm not superwoman over here. I am a very high capacity person. Like I just know that about myself. I have the ability to have a lot on my plate and I feel like I thrive that way. Like I enjoy that pace of life. And I still feel like I still like sit down and read a book for fun, and I get lots of quality time with my husband and I've found a lot of balance, but that has looked different in different seasons of my business. So like now, baking 90 loaves a week plus 72 scones and 140 cookies, like that is a lot. And I actually just last week hired an assistant. So I have an employee who works for me 20 hours a week. Um, so I'm not doing this by myself, but that doing that has given me a lot of space to have a good work life balance. And it's something that I'm always working on. And I always made a commitment to myself early in my business that if this kept me from being a good mother and a good wife, then it wasn't worth it to me. Like the point of this was so that I could do something I love, help support my family while also being a stay-at-home mom. Like stay-at-home mom is my first title and always my first priority. And so sometimes what that looks like is I oftentimes try to like every 5 or 6 weeks take a week off of baking so that I can just have a little bit of a reset week, focus on my girls, do some fun things with them. But right now, I only work in my bakery Tuesday through Thursday. So Tuesday is kind of like my prep day. Wednesday is my dough day. Thursday is my bake day. And then the other days of the week, I don't do any work for my bakery. And now that I have an assistant, she's actually going to be taking over all of the work I do on Tuesdays. So pretty soon, it'll just be Wednesdays and Thursdays that I'm actually working in the bakery. And that feels really, really good for me and for our family. So that's kind of how I manage it. Do I feel mom guilt sometimes? Of course. But like there is literally not a single mother in the world that's not going to feel guilty about something at some point. I think that is just part of our culture, right? That you have to be perfect at everything. And I encourage anybody feeling that way to take some of the pressure off your shoulders as long as you have your priorities right. Like I know that my priorities are right and that my family will always be a priority. So my family, we do find time for all of those things. Like we're very involved in our church, like that's a huge priority in our lives. And I still feel like we can be very invested in that. I still hang out with my friends. I still have my hobbies. Like I'm able to live a balanced life and do this, but it takes a lot of intentionality and a lot of organization. I'm a very organized person, so that probably helps a lot too. So if you're starting out and you're new at this, have some grace for yourself because it is tricky in the beginning to figure out a cadence that works for you, but you'll find it over time.
So is your primary selling platform, what is it like? It's not markets still, you sell, you
So,
just like pick up?
yeah, I work on a pre-order basis. So every Saturday at 10 a.m. my ordering opens. Um, and then Thursdays are pickups. And like I said, just this past week. So if you're listening and you're not aware, my family just moved. We moved at the end of June to a new home locally. So we're not far from where I was before. Um, but part of this move was a big growth in my business. So I actually have 3 pickup locations now, or 4 actually, 4 pickup locations. And again, my assistant is what makes that possible. She's the one that drives the bread to the other pickup locations. And yeah, so that's kind of how that works. Pickups are Thursdays from 2 to 6 p.m. every week.
Awesome. Okay. So let's get into the marketing and social media a little bit.
Yeah,
What are the ways you found best to market your business that brought more orders in?
yeah. It's kind of hard to say, to be honest. It really is tricky. Um, I do think that social media helped a lot. I think that there is something very exciting to people about seeing the behind the scenes that makes them feel like they're a part of it. And I think that people love that community aspect of it. Seeing um, they're seeing like what goes into the loaf of bread that they bring home. I think that that helped a ton. Um, I've never like I guess it's hard for me to say because I never viewed it as marketing. I viewed it as fun. Like posting fun videos on Instagram was just always like a passion project for me. And so like I said, I had such a casual approach at the beginning of my business that I think people could tell that like I wasn't trying to like sell them anything. I was just having a good time. And I think people would really appreciate that. Um, so I never like marketed very hard. I just was myself. I showed up, I talked to the camera, made them feel like we were friends and that I was just their like neighborhood baker, very casual. And it just kind of went from there. But social media has definitely been a huge part of this past year that was even more unexpected, I guess, than starting my bakery, which was also an unexpected part of last year. So, um, yeah, social media for sure has been huge.
What do you know what your follower count was when you started versus what it is now?
So I started my Instagram in April of 2023 at the same time as when I started my bakery. I actually remember I hit 10,000 in November of last year. I remember that because I was on vacation. And yeah, then it just grew from there. Yeah, 10,000 in November, and I hit 100,000 in March.
That's
Yeah,
great. That's a massive growth in 4 months.
yeah, it was a lot. Um, yeah, it's been a crazy ride. It was interesting. It was just an interesting experience, to be honest. I'm very thankful for it. And it's actually like a large portion of my business's income now, um, which I've focused in on purpose. We can talk more about that if that's applicable to the conversation. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to kind of realize like all of these avenues are like what
Hmm.
have led you to this moment in
Yeah,
time.
totally.
And so was there like a specific video or like something that you posted where it was like after that point, it was just kind of like you were
Yeah, once I hit
traction?
10,000, it like I said, it just like kind of spiraled. I've never really had a video go viral. Like I have some friends who just like will randomly have a video go viral. Mine was a little bit more like steady, I guess. Nothing like went crazy like with millions and millions of views. I think I have one reel with like maybe 2 million views, but that's the most that I've ever gotten. Um, but yeah, once I hit 10K, it grew a lot. And I specifically have chosen to focus in on social media because like I said, I'm a mom first, and we maybe will have more kids in the future. I do know that we plan on homeschooling our kids, at least to start. And so I know that baking and my micro bakery may look different in a few years, and I might not, I probably won't be able to bake as much as I am now. But I do know that social media is something that I can keep up with pretty easily. And it's very fun for me. I love connecting with my community. And if you use the platform properly, it can also be a really great source of income as well. So that's why I have very intentionally focused on social media because I think that long term it's a really good move for my business. Um, and between my social media and my micro bakery, it's all under one business. My profit margin is 91%. So, and that's because of social media. So that it makes a huge difference in what I'm able to do with my micro bakery.
Yeah, so do you think that there throughout this last year when you first started out, do you think that there was like a shift in some of the content that you were making? Like I know, well, I obviously have been looking at your social media and you do like a lot of educational videos. I mean, is it that or do you
Mm-hmm.
feel like they're like where were you when you first started out making content
Mm-hmm.
versus
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. So when I first started my Instagram, there were not very many micro bakeries making content the way that I was making content, which I think is part of the reason why my Instagram grew the way that it did. It was like me and like a few other micro bakers. Um, and so a lot of it was like day in the life of my micro bakery or like how I shape my sourdough loaves. And like those videos would just do so well because there weren't very many videos on Instagram like that. But in the last, I'm sure that you even see this, Megan, like in the last 6 to 12 months, there's been a boom of micro bakeries. And now there's a lot of people making that kind of content on Instagram. So it doesn't do as well. That's why accounts like that aren't growing. Like they see people with a large follower count, like how to bake it that, but I'm not, and it's just because the market has been kind of oversaturated. And so finding something that makes you stand out is so important. And so my content is definitely different than it was when it started. And it's been shifting a lot more to like lifestyle content where the content is focused on me as a person and the many facets of my life, right? So, motherhood, my micro bakery, being a business owner, being a wife, being a homemaker, like all of those different facets of who I am. I share more of those types of things now instead of just micro bakery content, because you're going to connect with your audience way, way more if they like you. That's kind of like the point of social media is that you want people to feel connected to you. Um, and that's mainly achieved by branching out a little bit into other facets of life.
Great. So how much time do you dedicate to social media and marketing every week, do you think?
Yeah, probably 5 hours or less, probably. It's hard to say because I'm also a consumer of of media. So, the lines get a little bit blurred and it can be a little bit tricky. Um, but I would say, yeah, like my philosophy is that like I document what I'm doing already. Every once in a while there will be a video that I like intentionally set out to do, like filming a recipe or something of that sort. But 90% of my content is just me filming things that I was doing already. Um, and then like editing reels can feel really like daunting to people. But again, you'll learn it as you go, right? Like everything that I'm doing now took me 5 times as long when I first started. Now it doesn't really feel like a big deal. I started YouTube in June. So I'm doing one video a week for that. But I hired a video editor for that. And I recently hired an agent for my social media. So they do like any like brand communication and stuff like that. So learning where to spend your money to gain your time back, you learn all of those things with time. Um, so yeah, I'd say like 5 hours or less.
That's great.
Hmm.
So do you feel like have your prices changed since you've been growing over the last year or
I did raise my prices once in the new year. Starting in January, I raised my um, bread loaves just a little bit. So like when I first started, I was doing $10 per loaf. They're organic. And then I raised it to $12 per loaf in the new year. And I did that because I was selling out every single week. And my finance guy was like, that this is how business goes, right? Like you want to price according to your area, right? So do market research and understand like what your competitors are charging. You don't want to price yourself out, right? But at the same time, like if you are selling out every single week, that probably means that you can raise your prices a little bit. And maybe that kicks a few people out and they say, you know what, that's too much for me. But then it also allows you to grow more. And so I did raise my prices just a dollar or two, depending on the item. But it actually made a really big difference. And my business has continued to grow since then. And my customers did not say a word. Like they didn't even notice. So yeah, it was a really good choice for me.
That's awesome. Um, cool. So, all right, we're gonna go into a little bit of the financials and business growth. We kind of already just
Hmm.
that. But so at what point did you hit your break even point after investing in your business?
Yeah, okay. This is another really tricky question for me to answer because social media and my micro bakery like really coincided quickly after I got like made my initial investment. So I think that I made my investment back maybe like a little bit faster than if I had only been doing my micro bakery. So I make a decent like affiliate marketing is a large portion of my monthly income. And so I mean like I actually made my investment back probably in 2 or 3 months in profit. So it I made my money back really fast. Like getting those pieces of equipment was such a good choice for me. Like I can't stress that enough. It was such a good choice for me. And yeah, the money was made back very quickly.
Before you um got the Simply Bread oven, did you do any research on any of the other ovens out there?
Oh yeah, I thoroughly researched everything. Would you believe that I'm a type A personality? Because I am. So yeah, I researched everything. And it was one of those things where I realized that no matter what I did, I was going to be spending a lot of money. And I wanted to make sure that I put my money in the right spot, right? Because there were some cheaper options out there that I could have considered, but I was like, I feel like those cheaper options would be great at first, but that I would eventually want to replace them. It makes no sense to buy a $4,000 oven just to then buy the $8,000 oven a year later, because then you actually spent $12,000 on the oven instead of eight. That's kind of where my thinking went. And especially as a mom, with children running around, I needed something that was easy and quick to use. So like that was part of the reason why I didn't want there were a few reasons why, like Rackmaster is probably like the most common competitor to Simply. It's also a great oven. I have friends that have it and enjoy it. But I needed something that was a little less hands-on. Like I liked that the Simply Bread oven had the like a screen to tell me what the temperature was inside. Because like a Rackmaster, you have to like take the temperature with like an infrared thermometer or whatever. And like the automatic steam, like I wanted to minimize the amount of time I needed to have the oven door open because I have kids running around and stuff. So I didn't want to have to like spray the steam. Again, like it takes 20 seconds to spray steam, sure, but like I wanted to have all of those things to make my process as seamless since I am baking in my home. And so that's kind of where I ended up with getting my Simply.
Yeah. Was it hard for you to transition from your home oven to the Simply?
Not at all. Like my first loaves were sellable. And also, I cannot get my loaves to look the way that they do when I bake them in my Simply Bread oven, which, so like sometimes I feel like a little bit bad because people are like, I can't get my loaf to like have a belly like your loaves have. And I'm like, to be honest, I couldn't either until I started baking in my Simply. There, like, my loaves always look significantly better when they are baked in the Simply Bread oven. And I think it's just like the steam, like the amount of steam that it can generate is just not achievable in a Dutch oven. Even if you're throwing ice cubes in there, like it's special. So
That's awesome. Cool. So what do you feel like would be like your best overall advice for somebody who is just starting their in-home bakery?
Yeah, I think that one piece of advice is that if you want it to become a business, you got to treat it like a business. Sometimes I see people treating it like a hobby, but wanting business like results. And the reality is that being a business owner requires you to give up your time, and it can be challenging, but it can be so worth it in the end if you stick with it. So things like you have to spend money in order to make money, right? Like that is just part of business. You can't just expect to make a whole bunch of money and put in minimal time, money, and effort. So that can be really scary. And I remember when I bought my oven just being so scared because I was like, this is such a huge like vote of confidence in myself that I was like, can I do this? Like, if I am spending this money to start this business, I am saying that I can do this, and that is a really daunting thing to do. But it was so worth it for me, and I'm so glad that I did it. Um, yeah, I think the other thing is to, at the same time, um, grow at your own pace, right? Like I said, there was never a point in my business growth that I felt like I was like just desperate for customers. That I was like, I just want to make more. I want to make more. Like I was just content and happy with whatever came my way. I kept focusing on putting out really good product and building a community, both locally and online. And that did the work for me. I wasn't texting people to place orders or asking them if they want to order anything for the week. Like I let it grow at its pace while also putting in as much effort as I could give it. And I was happy with that and still am happy with that. So those are my two like general pieces of advice.
I think that's really great advice. Okay, so we are going to just choose a couple of the questions in the chat to go over. And so if you have any other questions for Macy, feel free to just throw them in the chat, and the next 15 minutes will be dedicated to those questions.
Awesome.
Um, yeah.
Do you want me
So
to just like start? I'm
yeah, if
looking
you
at the
want to
questions right now.
choose some, go for it.
Yeah. So somebody asked about like ordering process. I use Hotplate currently. Simply also has a really great platform. There have been some features that I needed that weren't on the Simply app, but I do think they are now. So I love the Simply team. They're so stellar. But I also like Hotplate. It's been a really reliable way for me to run my business. And I actually think this isn't something we touched on during the Q&A, but the method in which I sell, I think has grown my business a lot. So basically how it works is I have a weekly drop. So every Saturday at 10 a.m. my menu drops and on Hotplate, and you can also do this on Simply. My customers can sign up for text notifications. So every single time my menu opens, my customers get a text message saying, Little Pearl Breads is opening for orders, with a link to go ahead and order. And so that is actually probably the best marketing tool that you could ever have. I don't have to market when my menu's open at all because my customers are already notified automatically. And then what that also does is it created this kind of like frenzy. So like there are certain things that I have that sell out really quickly. So there are people like waiting before 10 a.m. even starts, adding things to their cart so that they can get what they want when ordering opens. So it's kind of created this like competitiveness of people wanting to get their things in. And so that drives up sales a lot. And so I cannot recommend enough from the beginning. As soon as you start your microbakery, you don't need to be selling even 20 loaves a week to use a platform like that. Even if you are only selling 3 loaves a week, use a platform like that because number one, it's so user friendly and customers are way more likely to buy if it's easy to buy from you. But also, the built in marketing is like it is everything. So Hot Plate, the Simply app, I think those are the only two that offer the text notifications when a menu opens. But yeah, so that's how it works. And then I bake everything on Thursdays and people pick it up from the pickup locations. So that's how that works. Um, did I miss anything on that, Megan?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. Somebody asked if I cover my bread when I cold ferment. I do not. I do not cover my bannetons. I do cover my sandwich loaves because they cold proof in like the tins, and I don't want them to get like crusty on top. But I don't cover my classic loaves and bannetons at all. And they no, they don't dry out. They are totally fine. I will say I have a dedicated dough fridge, so they're also not going to be contaminated by anything. So keep that in mind. Like if you're using your personal fridge and there's other stuff in there that could potentially like get onto a loaf of bread, I'd probably cover them. Um, but not in my dough fridge. Let's see. Starter care. Yes, I feed my starter the day before my dough day. So actually, it's a great example. Today is Tuesday. So this is kind of like my prep day. Tomorrow, I'm going to be mixing my 90 loaves. And before this call at 3 p.m., I fed my starter so that I can start mixing dough at 3:30 in the morning. So yes, I bake or not bake my starter. Don't bake your starter. I feed my starter um, the night before because I start mixing my dough very early in the morning. Let's see. Um, Somebody asked about social media and bread sales. I kind of touched on this, but I have definitely had customers say like, Instagram suggested you to me, and then I realized you were local, and so then they bought bread from me. So I definitely have gotten sales, like local sales, by posting on Instagram. I make sure to tag my location in everything that I post. Um, and so the Instagram algorithm will definitely promote local posts to local people. So it definitely helps. Um, do I ever feel pressure from social media? It's a really good question. Sometimes, yes. I think that social media can be a huge blessing, and I don't think that working on social media is for everyone. You have to kind of have um, thick skin, I guess. I would say that 98% of my Instagram experience is very positive, but you would be surprised how much that 2% can affect you when it happens. Just rude comments or people assuming that they know who you are when they don't, and there's no way to remedy that, but it can be not fun sometimes, but you have to learn how to just let it roll off your back and you just move on. Or even, I'm sure that a lot of people experience this if you have a microbakery account, just comparison, right? Comparison is the thief of joy. Um, and it's so unfair to yourself to compare yourself to anybody else and anybody else's journey, right? Um, Everyone starts somewhere. And if you can just focus on yourself and chug along, you will be so much happier. But even I fall into the trap of like, oh man, that was such a good idea. Why didn't I think of it? And if I do it, then I'm going to look like a copycat. Or, oh, this person's getting so many more followers than I am. Like, it's so silly. It's so silly. And it means literally nothing. But sometimes it feels like it means something, but it doesn't. So, let's see. Somebody asked if I have a newsletter. Not yet, but I'm working on it. So stay tuned for that. So they asked how I handle customer complaints. I have had very few customer complaints, but it has happened and it's really good to learn how to handle them. So there was one time that a hair ended up in somebody's bag of cookies. And like I always have my hair up when I'm baking, right? Like I clean very thoroughly. But when you're baking bread in a home, inevitably something like that could happen. And so somebody reached out to me. They were very kind. They're like, hey, just so you know, I found a hair in my bag of cookies. And immediately I took ownership of it. I said, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. There's absolutely no excuse for that. And I really apologize. I told them it's incredibly important to me to, maintain a sanitary baking space, and I'm really thankful that you told me. And then I always refund them for their order and I give them a coupon code for their next purchase. It's like so not a big deal. And they were really appreciative, and that's kind of how I handle it. If there's ever a complaint, I refund them, I give them a discount for the next order, and I take full ownership over whatever complaint they have. So that's how I handle that. Let's see. What else do we have in here? Recommendations for a good refrigerator. I have an Insignia upright freezer slash fridge. So it's actually marketed as a freezer, but it has a refrigerator mode as well. And it's really great. I have the 21 cubic foot one, and I can fit like 100 loaves in it. So it works really, really well for me. I got it from Best Buy. I think that that's the main place that I sell. So um yeah. Anything else, Megan? Or does anybody else have questions?
Let's see, I think we have another. Uh,
Learning curve with the oven. I kind of mentioned this earlier. No, the short answer is no. I was able to sell the first loaves that I baked in my oven. It's like very user friendly. So
um, I guess one last question we could have. What are your hopes for growth in the future?
yeah. Well, I just went through, like, I'm kind of in the midst actually of like my next step of growth. Like I said, this past week was my first big bake back in our new house. I have a whole room dedicated to my microbakery. Like, you guys don't understand what it means to me to have my refrigerator in the same room that I prep in, because my refrigerator used to be in my basement. And so every day on dough day, I would carry 75 loaves of bread downstairs and then back up the stairs at 4 a.m. to bake the next morning. And like, it was just so much. So this new space is life changing for me. I see somebody asked how large the room is. It is 10 feet by 13 feet. I know that because I had to take measurements to make sure it all fit in there. So I have two workbenches, my oven, my mixer, and my refrigerator, and like some shelving and stuff for all of my supplies. I just started offering multiple pickup locations. So I actually am paying some of my customers to host porch pickups. So that's really cool and really fun. We distribute the bread, and it's their responsibility to make sure that the pickups run smoothly. They set up like a little tent in their driveways and stuff like that. So that's a huge element of growth for my business. Um, and then I'm upping my quantities of items that I offer now that I have my assistant working for me, and we have more capacity to do things like that. But I am almost at my cap already again, which I'm actually okay with. I really like the amount that I'm baking right now, and I don't see myself growing too far beyond what I'm doing right now. But I'm, like I said, I'm definitely focusing more in on social media and things like that. Like I said, starting my YouTube channel, and focusing in on that side of my business is kind of my main focus right now. So,
Awesome. Have you ever thought about opening up a brick and mortar?
when I first started my microbakery, I considered it, but I don't think that's anything that I plan on doing. Um, like I said, I love staying home with my girls. We plan to homeschool in the future. And I like being home. It works really well for us. So I don't think so. You never know, but I don't think so.
And I guess, okay, this is a question I forgot to ask you. Was the 220 volt
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
and was that difficult for you to get?
I have a story for this. So, in our previous house, we had an electrician also. My 3-year-old is banging on the door right now. So I'm hoping my husband comes to get her, but sorry if you hear that in the background. um, So in our previous home, we had an electrician friend who installed it for me. It took him like an hour and a half. Um, he charged us like barely anything. So like I don't really count that as like a real experience because I don't think he charged us like what a real electrician would charge us. But then in this new house, obviously we bought it with the intention of using a specific room for my bakery, and this was like a huge part of us moving. And we have an electrician come to look at the space, give us a quote, and this was 4 days before we actually move in. And he was like, I don't think we can put the outlet in that room. And if we can, it's going to cost you thousands and thousands of dollars. And I was like, no, just no. Like, tell me something else because that is not an acceptable answer. So I was, needless to say, I was panicked. The next day, we have a second opinion electrician come, and he's like, "Oh no, this is no big deal. I can do it for $500." It was done the next day. So all that to say, if you have any trouble getting the outlet installed in your house, get a second opinion because it really ended up not being a big deal. But yeah, it cost me $500. It took him just a few hours and it was done. So,
That's awesome.
yep.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard some interesting stories about that situation, but I mean, it's different for every person. Like
It is.
some of our bakers use they already have an outlet in their home because
Right.
they're like washing machine or, whatever.
Right.
So
Yep, yep. All
really,
that, like, but for sure, like if somebody's giving you like if they're quoting you really, really high or they're saying it's going to be impossible, like just get a second opinion because it ended up working out for me in the end. And it in most homes, it really shouldn't be a huge deal. So
great. Well, let's just answer this one last question. Did you add the auto timer? Oh, this is for me. Did you add the auto timer into your oven so it
oh
needs to preheat? Oh, did you? That part is for you. But for me, um,
yes, so I have been using a auto timer, um, and like I think it's debated on whether that's a good idea or not. I get it. It's like, I guess it's like use at your own risk, right? Like, but I do use this. Well, I had been, it broke, so I haven't been using it. But it's this, you plug it into your outlet and then you plug the oven into the timer and you set basically what time you want the oven to start. And then it's like a clock and it like trips over it at whatever specific time you set, and then your oven automatically starts. Um, it's like if a house fire caught, your insurance probably wouldn't cover you if you're using one of those. I used one for a year, so it was fine, but I haven't been recently because it just stopped working. Um, but yeah, I also want SBO too. I wish that there was an automatic timer. I
yeah,
talked to Stan about it extensively when I was in California, but I was like, my mom's home oven, you can preheat from your phone, but I understand it's tricky.
yeah, I think there's still a lot. Like we've been growing a lot, but we're also still kind of a new business.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot
Yep.
of things that we have to figure out before we can get
Mm-hmm.
stage.
Yep.
So hopefully in the future we would be able to have one. But for now there are workarounds like Macy is doing. So
Mm-hmm. Use
yeah,
at your own risk.
yes. Um, all right. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us today and sharing all about your journey in this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I love the Simply team and I love helping other bakers in whatever way I can. So I'm thankful to be here.
Awesome. So we'll send everybody a replay of this video so that you can rewatch it, take notes, whatever you need. And Macy also has a discount code for a free
Hmm.
accessory bundle if you click on her link, which we will send to everybody in the email. So, or you can
Perfect.
go find Macy on social media, which I'm sure
Yep.
most of you are following her anyway. So, all right, cool. Well, I hope that you have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you later.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.